This week on the WriterCon podcast.
Well, for me, the best advice I've ever had is don't quit, don't stop. And so that's my answer is even when you feel like stopping, just keep going. I mean, even if you write a paragraph a day, at least you're moving forward in some way. So don't get discouraged.
Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Hey there, writers. I'm joined today, as usual, by our sound engineer, Jesse Ulrich, and my wife and the award-winning novelist, Lara Bernhardt. Let me tell you a little bit about our plans for the future of this podcast. We're going to record more episodes this year. We did that a little bit during the summer run-up to a WriterCon, and it seemed to work. We got a lot more subscribers and listeners, so we're going to continue doing more episodes, but I can see already that there's going to be a week here and there where we just can't do it, a fifth week in a month or whatever. So periodically, we're going to run a classic episode, which just means we're going to pluck the interview from a past episode. We won't repeat the news, which is surely not news anymore. But if there's in it, I mean, if you've heard it, fine, skip it. But you might have missed it or forgotten it or just need to hear it again. So here's an extra jolt of WriterCon, occasionally in the form of WriterCon Classics. Lara, you've listened to, I think, all of these. Do you have a favorite interview from past episodes?
I'm going to say probably Steve Berry, which, again, maybe a little biased. We know Steve and Liz, and they've taken us through Disney a little bit, which of course we love.
They're on the A-list for all time.
They're on the A-list because they share our love of Disney. But what a great interview he gave. Some very, very honest and open commentary on his experiences with publishing. I think that's good for us all to hear.
Yeah, you remember when he talked about maybe he doesn't want us to remind people, but the publisher who recommended that he write a book outside his series, his hugely successful series, which you would think no publisher would ever say, and yet they did. And of course, the book wasn't what they hoped it would be. Didn't matter. Steve pulled it back together. He's smart and he's a very good writer. But that's an example of, if you think it's just people who are just starting out who have problems, no, everybody has problems. This is a tough business. Yeah. But if you're persistent and you don't quit, it works out. Jesse, how about you? Do you have a favorite? You've been with this podcast for years now.
I mean, the problem is my favorites would be ones where like the guest had a microphone and headphones. So like it wouldn't be the content so much as it'd be the audio quality.
Didn't try to do the interview on their phone.
Yeah, so in that case, Barry's interview that he did it in my studio, that one sounded great. So
yeah, the sound was excellent. I gotta agree. Okay, our interview today is with Susy Smith, who has just published her second novel, Ascendant, which is a sequel to Asylum. These are terrific post-apocalyptic thrillers, and I'm kind of a sucker for that genre. If you are too, you're going to love these books, and you may love them even if you're not. We'll talk to Susy about her work, but first, the news. Jesse, take us away. Well, you knew it was going to happen, and it did. There have, of course, been a slew of class action lawsuits filed against OpenAI, usually alleging copyright infringement because the programs appear to be, to use a technical term, scraping copyrighted material found somewhere on the internet and using it to train these AI generative problems. Now, we already had a couple, 7 actually. We reported on the 2 lawsuits filed by Sarah Silverman and friends, but now the Authors Guild, the closest thing writers have in this country to a union. The Authors Guild filed a class action lawsuit against OpenAI. Not the first, but one people are paying attention to. OpenAI, because they represent so many lawyers and so many big names like George R.R. Martin have joined the lawsuit. Now, OpenAI, of course, has filed a motion to dismiss, and that's pretty much what always happens. But the Authors Guild is working with a different law firm than the other lawsuits, and two different law firms, in fact, to bring their case, which is only focusing on copyright infringement of fiction writers. There are a lot of other things that OpenAI can do that you could complain about, but they're focusing, because it's the Authors Guild, on writers and writers' claims, copyright protection, and that sort of thing. Lara, you going to join the class action lawsuit if you get an option?
On principle, yes, I would. Quick search didn't pull up any of my books in some of these.
Rude.
I know, right?
Well, maybe not. Explain what that is, Lara.
How do you want to feel about that? But it doesn't look like my books are being used in any sort of copyright violation way. But I support everyone who is finding their books there.
Didn't you say some of my books were there?
Yes, they are, dear.
Well, I would hope you
doubly
said.
rude. It's sexist too.
Yeah.
It's stealing people's stuff and it's sexist. Unbelievable.
All the bad
Incredible.
things.
Is that what I've been seeing on like Instagram and whatnot? Authors like searching a thing for their name to see if their
Yes.
books have been scraped. Is that what that is? Okay, I figured.
It's just one of a number of software usages, but yes, that's exactly what's happening. So that won't. Who knows? Maybe another system is scraping my books.
Yeah.
Right. Now, Jesse, I thought you might actually like this because you can now use OpenAI to generate those last two George R.R.
Yeah.
Martin Game of Thrones
Listen,
books.
I mean,
because he's not gonna.
Get George,
so-
my guy. Like, let your people handle this. Get click on your word processor, buddy. I need to see where this book goes.
Maybe that's why he's
yeah.
in the lawsuit. He's afraid somebody will
Yeah,
generate the
yeah.
last two books.
I'm just like it's gonna be another Robert Jordan situation where Brandon Sanderson gets hired to finish Game of Thrones, and I'm gonna be like, fine. Which I mean, those books were great. So it's really just a running joke now where I think he just doesn't want to finish them. So
Yeah, clearly he does not want to, and
no.
having more fun doing TV, which I totally get.
Yeah, no, listen, I get it. Live your best life, George. But I mean, this is one of those weirdly important things because these books are private materials. They shouldn't be on the internet easily accessible via a scraper that OpenAI is using. And so they shouldn't have access to it unless they pay you for it. And then even so, it should be a different fee if they're going to use it in their sort of AI tools that helps other people create things. It's a whole new sort of branch of like Creative Commons, fair use type of arguments of like, what is fair use of someone's story via an AI tool? Like, we don't know. We haven't determined.
Absolutely agree. And people have come to consider that art should be free, and I don't understand that. Theft is theft. If you take something that someone has worked hard to create and you don't compensate them for it, and they didn't offer it to you for free, you have stolen it.
Yeah.
In my mind, it is that simple.
And writers have to eat too. So
That is correct.
pay
Artists need to
mortgages
eat.
and tuition, a lot of other stuff. Okay, news story 2 is sort of the flip side of AI, and another instance of a story that I never thought I would read, but this is apparently true. 2 huge Silicon Valley training data giants, that is, people who are training these AI programs, Scale AI and Appen, are hiring, wait for it, you're thinking programmers, tech experts? No, they're hiring poets. Poets and writers with humanities backgrounds, including in foreign languages, and they're being asked to write original short stories to feed AI models. So nobody can complain that they stole copyrighted material, but still the programs are getting original fiction, obviously, to boost the literary quality of these AI generative writing tools. So, what do you think about that? Jesse, you think you could teach AI to write poetry?
I mean, it's a classic Jurassic Park conundrum. Like, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. Right. And I appreciate these authors and poets wanting a salary, probably a much higher salary than they would get doing their art. But yeah, they're training the enemy here, and I don't really. I worry about this.
Sleeping with the enemy. This is right.
Yeah. Wow. Again, and who knows what. I still truly believe that like AI will never be able to perfectly mimic a human being's creativity, because human creativity is not orderly, and it's chaotic, and it doesn't always make sense from a mathematical standpoint. And as long as that stays true, you'll always, I believe, we'll always be able to sort of tell if a machine created something versus a person. So, but maybe I'm just being overly optimistic.
Well, it depends on whether they're trying to write well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I could imitate AI-generated prose.
Yeah. And
pass it off, but I don't think AI could imitate me and pass it off as a William Bernhardt book yet.
Would it know to make like a Star Trek reference every like 34 pages? Yes. Right? I don't think it would know that.
I mean, if you fed it all 20 Ben Kincaid novels, could it write a 21st? Probably. The question is, how good would it be?
Yeah.
How good would it be? I actually, just for curiosity's sake, used an AI resource to see how it would, what kind of book description it would produce for one of my books, just to see. And I thought it was trash. Oh, I would never have used it.
That makes me happy.
Creatives create from a place of usually very high emotion. It might be very negative, very positive. We've usually been through a lot. And that, I think, is what produces good art. And
I hope you're right.
No computer is going to be able to mimic that. The problem is, do people become so accustomed to it that they don't know the difference anymore? That they're used to seeing average, adequate, okay writing, and they decide that's the bar.
Jesse, speaking of AI-generated stories,
yes.
Here I'm about to make a Star Trek reference. So if you hate Star Trek, just cut to the interview. But anyway, you remember the episode where Data goes onto the holodeck wanting to be Sherlock Holmes?
Yes.
He's already read all the stories.
Yes, he has.
The holodeck generates a completely new story for him.
Yeah, a murder bot that tries to take over the ship.
Well, there is that, yes, but it did generate a pretty good story for him.
It did. But the Data trying to be more human stories always leads to a weird technical question where you're like, okay, he wants to dream. Like, do we want our robots, AI, androids dreaming? I don't know. Yeah. Like, some things are human based, and like the whole point of that argument was that the computer, the Star Trek, the Enterprise computer was able to create an enemy that could defeat Data, the android, right? And thus made a hologram that was able to do things that holograms couldn't do. We will bypass all the problems with that episode. But yeah, the amount of like what, I guess the question is, and humanity has to answer this, what do we want our AI bots to do? Do we want them to be artists? Like, is that something we need as a society? I don't. I think we have plenty of artists. Why don't we just pay them, right?
I'm going to go ahead and play devil's advocate here. You guys are debating this deck, but the story was written by a human.
That's right.
That's true.
Okay, here's what we do. We get OpenAI to rewrite that Star Trek episode and see how it turns out. And see which one's better. And
that's how you figure it out. Exactly.
A competition between humans and AI to who can write a better novel. I think the human's going to win, but it'd be fun to see it.
Well, it depends on who judges.
That's true.
In our WriterCon magazine, we have an entry where one of our authors did exactly that and came up with some pretty marginal results.
Yeah, it's worth reading about.
Check out the magazine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Everybody wants the WriterCon magazine, and you'll be able to find out how to do that just by reading the show notes. All right. Jesse, cue up the music. Let's talk to Susy Smith. Susy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's good to see you and Lara.
You too. Okay, you know what the first question is going to be. If you could offer writers a piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, for me, the best advice I've ever had is don't quit, don't stop. And so that's my answer is even when you feel like stopping, just keep going. I mean, even if you write a paragraph a day, at least you're moving forward in some way. So don't get discouraged.
Yeah,
you'll get there.
Great advice. Hey, you've got a new book out,
I do.
Ascendant, which is a sequel to Asylum, which is over my head, because even though I had Ascendant, I couldn't find it. So we probably sold them all at WriterCon, right? Because you sold a bunch. So
Good,
at
I'm
any
glad.
rate, that's why I have Asylum there. But the new book but they're related. So
Yes.
Tell us about Ascendant.
Ascendant picks up right where Asylum leaves off. And it's basically, in a nutshell, these two books, it's a series. I'm in the middle of the third one. It's a story of survival, a story about my protagonist and her struggle to survive against the government who has taken over when the United States went through what I call the big crash. So it's her story about survival.
So we're in kind of a post-disaster world.
Post-apocalyptic. Yeah, think of the Walking Dead without the zombies.
Zombies.
Well, do the zombies matter? It's mostly people killing each other. The
Yes,
Walking Dead,
yeah.
isn't it? So I might prefer your version, I think.
I think this sounds actually like something that a lot of people predict. I mean, it doesn't sound that far-fetched. A lot of people are predicting that we're going to suffer a crash like that. How did you choose or create this setting for these books, this series?
Well, I wanted a backdrop. It's really a backdrop. I didn't want to do a sickness because that had been done. And so I was thinking, and then I was actually just looking around at the United States and seeing, just kind of judging where we were at. And after 9/11, everything kind of everybody got scared and our security bubbles popped and so that's what made me start thinking. And I thought, well, an economic meltdown, an economic crash is not, it's not that far-fetched. I mean, we had that trouble in 2008 and, so who's to say that there couldn't be a big crash? And so I kind of went from there.
So many good stories start with that question, what if, and go from there. Can you give us a little bit of a hint what's coming in future books? And do you know how many there will be?
I'm right in the middle of the third one, and I don't know if this is the correct thing to say or not, but I'm not quite sure. There's a couple of ways that I could end it. There's a couple of ways I could end it. And if I end it, open-ended, I can keep writing, or I could put a period on it and maybe revisit it later, but at least people will have a satisfying resolution where they can be okay. So I really haven't decided. I'm in the middle, and it's coming time. I mean, it's the closer I get, the more I'm just trying to make that decision. So
let me just offer some advice from the guy who hasn't read the manuscript and only marginally knows what you're talking about. But my advice is leave the door open.
leave
you'll
it
be
open.
glad you did. You can still give the book a satisfying. I mean, I am talking about. I said there were only going to be 6 Daniel Pike books too, but I seem to have just published the 7th. So leave the door open.
Leave the door
is
open.
what I'm saying. You might get a better idea later.
Well, there is, the thing about secondary characters that I absolutely love is that as the more books that you write with them in there, the more they develop, and I could do it from another character's perspective.
Yeah.
So I do have ideas.
Okay,
So
cool.
I think it'll come to you. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got hit with a sudden idea for a different ending to my current work in progress, which is about 3/4 of the way finished. And I went
wow.
back to my outline. It gave me all the feels. I got really excited about it. I got goosebumps. I texted a couple people. I was like, what if I do this instead? And they were like, yes, do it. And so I bet you have a moment like that. And it's fine. I'll go back when I'm revising. I might catch things that weren't quite right for that ending, and I'll make it so that it'll work.
Right.
Hey, Susy, you've been part of this WriterCon world for a while. I know you've come to the conferences. I remember you're at one of the small group, what we call retreats now. But was it 2, 3, 4 years ago? You won the big contest at and that was with Asylum, right? You won the best novel and of course, now it's been published, right?
Yep. 2020. Yep.
So that was cool. But my question is going to be about the small group, because we talk about these retreats sometimes, and I think sometimes people, they can see the benefit of a big conference, but what's the benefit to you, do you think, of being in a small group retreat, an environment like that?
Oh, there's nothing that compares to it. Don't get me wrong, I love WriterCon. I love the big setting, but I actually prefer the retreats because you get more one-on-one time, not only with you and Lara, but with fellow writers, and getting their feedback is invaluable. I mean, it's something that I couldn't get sitting here at home writing by myself. I couldn't get it anywhere else. So that's a huge benefit, at least for me. That's a boon. That's the best thing ever, is to get other writers' feedback on what you've written.
Sure.
You know that a lot of the people listening to the podcast are writers like we are, and they like to know all about process. So, traditional question, pantser or planner?
I am half and I am half and half. Absolutely right down the middle.
The answer is yes.
Yes, that is correct. I do write an outline. There are benefits to having an outline, to knowing where you're starting, knowing where you're ending, and having something in the middle that is going to sustain you through writing what I call the muddy middle. But as far as to the letter and making that outline so detailed that I don't stray from it, that's no. I don't do that. I allow myself grace, I guess, to for the story to go where I think it needs to go. And I look back at the outline and I'm like, I'm on chapter 18, and I'm only describing what's way up here. So, and different things have happened. So,
I'll go back and I have an outline for sure, kind of like what you're describing. I think it's smart to give yourself that creative leeway, but I'll go back and modify as things change and adapt, and I get a better idea or like something or a new idea. I absolutely do. I think that's just smart to keep it open to yourself so that those new ideas can benefit your book. I think that's good. I don't think planning means we have everything nailed down when we start.
Right. Well, in the second book, I had like in Ascendant, I guess Ascendant. It happened over a very specific period of time, and I was changing perspectives, and to keep track of the timeline and the days. On that part, I had to be very. So I was very detailed, and I'd go and I'd write down everything that I had done on that day. Okay. So I wouldn't get confused.
Sure. That's perfect usage of an outline, in my opinion. Yeah. What does your typical writing day look like? Are you still juggling maybe a daytime job with writing? Do you have the luxury of focusing primarily on writing?
I really wish I had the luxury of focusing primarily on writing. I think I could get a lot more done. I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning. I get around and I devote at least an hour of writing before I go to work, before I go to my daytime job. And then if I have time somewhere else, then that's just a bonus. But at least I've gotten, and I've disciplined myself. I'm very, very disciplined about that hour. It's beneficial to me in several different ways, not just to get my writing, progress, but it's also a mental thing with me. It also really, really helps my, mental stability, I guess is what you'd say.
Well, I'm impressed and jealous. I'm not coherent at 5 a.m. Even if I make myself get up at 5 a.m., I won't be productive. Oh, Bill laughs. Thank you.
I decided not to weigh in. I kept my lips closed.
That's not my productive time. I think it's important that people acknowledge what's going to work for them and then stick with it. That's right. That's the important thing. And if you work well and that's the process that produces words on the page for you, wonderful. Yep. I think that's good. But not me. To Bill's chagrin, do much better if I stay up late working. He'd rather I, go to
Some
bed.
people are night owls, like, my husband's a night owl.
I kind of get a second wind, like when everything calms down. Bill talks about liking to get up in the morning when the house is quiet. I like when everyone is
it's nice.
Buttoned down to bed and it goes quiet again. And it's like I get a second wind and ideas start churning. It fascinates me. I love talking to everyone and hearing what works, and we hear a different process for almost every writer. But the important thing is what you said earlier, stick with it and make sure you actually do keep going.
Yes.
So since we've acknowledged, Susy, that you've been at this for a while, is that fair? It was not an overnight success road to publication. And we mentioned that you've been to the WriterCon retreats, and everything you heard there was brilliant, of course. But
definitely,
have there been any obstacles or any bad advice or bad experiences along the way?
I haven't really had any bad experiences with WriterCon or anything like that. I think learning to write is something that every writer has to work out for themselves. And like on Asylum, I tell everybody with Asylum, I learned how to write on that book because that book was a process for me that took quite a while. I had a first draft and I completely tore it apart. Kind of makes me tear up maybe a little bit, but I completely tore it apart. I mean, I kept the bones of it, the root of it, but basically changed everything else. And even still then, I had to go back and re-edit and learn how to make every word count and watch, make those words count. Right. That kind of a thing. So
right. Absolutely. Well, are there any positive lessons that you've learned along the way? Then some survival tips or something you didn't know at the beginning but was helpful later?
Survival tips.
Something that improved your writing.
Well, okay, you put it that way.
Having worked with you, I'm going to say your writing has improved significantly.
Because
yes,
your voice is in the back of my head. Yeah. I say this to everyone. I'm looking at a character and I'm putting them in a worst case scenario, and I hear your voice say, how can you make it worse? How can it be worse than that? Go that extra step. How can it, and so that was a really good piece of advice, because the books that I write, I need to be intense and I need to be quick, fast paced, it snap, 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 snap. And putting my characters in the worst possible position, and then dropping them into a hole after that.
Right, exactly. That's when it gets dramatic.
So yeah, that was one of the best things that I've ever heard to date, and it stays with me. It really does.
Okay, Lara, I think that should be on my tombstone. How can you make it worse?
Noted.
Smartest thing ever. All right, one last question, which I think you've already touched on, but what's next? What are you going to work on next?
I am right in the middle of the third book of the Asylum series, and when I finish, I will probably leave that door open. I may jump to something else. I may jump and give my brain a break from post-apocalyptic stuff and lean more towards a paranormal jaunt. Maybe I'll stay in the sci-fi. I'll stay in the sci-fi genre, though. I love it. Yeah. Go figure. I wouldn't have thought that in a million years.
Well, I didn't expect to be writing legal thrillers, since that term didn't exist in 1991 when my first book was published. But sometimes you can't predict everything, right?
That's exactly right.
But here you are, 2 books and a third under the belt, and probably more after that. We'll all be very anxiously waiting for them. Hey, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Hey, Lara, it's getting close to Halloween. Tell us about the Whatland Files.
This is a supernatural suspense series I like to describe as the X-Files meets Ghost Hunters. So we have a psychic who goes around examining and investigating paranormal disturbances, and she has a partner who is a skeptic who does not believe ghosts exist. So she sees dead people, he doesn't believe in ghosts, but they're both really hot, so there's some good chemistry, lots of fun. I actually was pleased to see that the latest release, last year's release, Christmas Spirit, was a finalist recently in one of the awards that I entered it into in the horror category. So very delightful.
Lara, you've said all the essential information about this book series, except you wrote it.
Well, of course.
Let's give credit where due. You wrote these wonderful books. There we go.
Thank you. Yes.
And I will also mention, you can hold the applause, Jesse, but the 7th book in the Daniel Pike legal thriller series, and technically the 20th book in the Ben Kincaid legal thriller series, is now on sale. Just last week, my new book, Partners in Crime, came out, which takes my 2 series lawyers on a cross-country road trip where they're going to encounter Roswell aliens and San Diego cosplay, snowstorms, barroom brawls, assassination attempts, possible cartel rub-out, and an old acquaintance who is now behind bars. So please give it a look. There'll be links in the show notes, okay, for both Lara and I's books and my books. Until next time, keep writing, and remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. All right, see you next time.